We're going to get started. I have tried to see if a good number of those around can hear me, and apparently, Mr. Israel here can hear me. I think Queen can also hear me. So I guess we're going to get started with today's lecture, and then we see how it goes. So, because at some point we're going to be having some interaction, I may have to be using my phone to follow up on the WhatsApp just in case maybe we have lost touch with anyone. And also, I want
Can
to
you hear
say
me?
that, yes, I can hear you, Queen.
Okay.
So, I also want to say that occasionally in the course of the training, I may be asking for your contribution or for your input. Please make sure you are available, make sure you are present, and make sure you are following. The WhatsApp group is still open for conversation in the course of today's program. So I'll be starting today's lecture with a class that we titled Business Decision Making and Problem Solving. So essentially, we're going to be looking at business decision making and problem solving. I would encourage you to have your notes somewhere close to you so that you can easily take notes of whatever we are discussing. I would also encourage you to ask questions maybe by the end of the lecture or somewhere in the lecture, and to also bring in your own inputs in the course of our discussion. So, we are starting off with business decision making and problem solving. It is important to establish that in business, um, a lack of problem solving skills and good decision making skills, two things here: problem solving skills and good decision making skills. A lack of these two skills can result in poor adaptation to market changes, meaning that when the market is changing, people who lack good problem solving skills or good decision making skills, they don't usually adapt early, and that leads to their downfall. It also can lead to ineffective strategic planning. So because these people, they don't know how to make decision, or they haven't thought about how to develop their problem solving skills, they often don't have any strategic planning that gives them advantage over um, other business owners in the same space. And also, it can lead to mismanagement of resources. And what this means is that when you don't have strong decision making skills or problem solving skills, you mismanage resources. And resources are very limited. But because people are not prepared to actually do business, they often mismanage these resources. And ultimately, these things will lead to a business failure. Why are we bringing this course today? Why are we starting with it? Because we believe that business is essentially a decision making process. Entrepreneurship is not just about starting a business, it's about making a critical decision or making some critical decisions. And so, when entrepreneurs or business owners or career professionals, managers, and leaders are trained to be able to make decisions, they actually get better at building their businesses. So, that being said, let us look at what a decision making is. What is decision making? Decision making, if you are taking notes, is like choosing the best course of action when you are faced with multiple paths. So here is a business owner, or here is an entrepreneur, or here is a manager or a leader of a unit that has to make a decision because he or she is faced with multiple options or multiple paths. And each of these paths comes with its own risks and, of course, reward. So, this manager or leader has got to make a singular decision in the face of multiple options or alternatives. And whatever option the leader has chosen to pursue would ultimately determine the future of the organization. And so the leader would have to be extra careful with whichever option that they go for. So an example, for instance, or a case study is Nokia. Nokia had a critical failure because they dismissed the smartphone revolution. And what happened was that the decisions the Nokia team made at some point happened to be not so great a decision. It's something that I've taught us a lesson in business education today. One, they ignored the threats from iPhone's touchscreen technology. They saw these things coming, but for some reasons, maybe because they had the largest market shares at that time, maybe because they felt like maybe this is going to be another trend or another fancy stuff, they neglected it. They also were stubbornly stuck to the Symbian OS despite its limitation. They saw the iOS, they saw the revolution of smartphones coming in, but they were stuck to Symbian because that is what was working at the time. That singular decision had contributed to why Nokia is, will I say, nowhere to be found today. They failed to recognize changing consumer preferences for apps and internet-centric devices. And what is the outcome of that? Nokia lost 90% share in mobile phones and eventually had to sell off their division to Microsoft. So every time you as a business manager or as a business leader is not paying critical attention to decisions that you are supposed to be making, whether you are ignoring those decisions, you are avoiding those decisions, or you are making those decisions, you are ultimately determining the next 10 years of your organization's lifespan. Let us take, for instance, Kodak. Kodak made their own mistake in digital photography, where they, even though they were one of the first people, if not the first people, to invent the first digital camera in 1975, but they had to suppress it because at that time they were already using the analog type, which is the Kodak film. They felt that the digital one is going to sort of be a distraction and it might not even have a future. But look at where the world is today. The physical ones are nowhere to be found, and most of us, if not all of us, are relying on digital photography. They focused on defending traditional film business rather than innovating. So they looked at what has been working for them and they decided to stay there rather than think of what is going to be the desires and what is going to be the needs of tomorrow. They also failed to recognize that sharing photos, not just taking them, would be crucial. It's not just enough to take photos. Maybe it has worked a couple of decades ago, but a time is coming where people don't just want to take pictures, but they want to share them as quickly as they can. So that being said, it affected Kodak and they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. They lost their dominant position in photography market. These two instances that I've cited for you, the first is Nokia, the second is Kodak. One critical element that is missing here is good decision making. And I'm not saying this to say that Nokia is not a success. I believe they've built something, they built one of the most tremendous companies anybody can build. But what I'm trying to bring out is that it doesn't matter how big your company grows or how small your company is today. If we engage ourselves in critical thinking and good decision making, we will build the best companies and organizations of the future. That is what I'm trying to point out. Our future, either as individuals or as organizations, will be determined by the decisions or choices that we make today. We are where we are today because of the decisions we made yesterday. So be careful of whatever decision you are making in your business. Decision I'm going to list out some of those decisions for you to take note of. Because as a business person, or as a career person, or as an entrepreneur, we need to understand the critical areas that we are going to be making decisions in our business. And the first place I want to point out is strategic decision making. Every business must make strategic decisions. And what are some of those strategic decisions? Well, let me start by asking, what is our long-term goal, our long-term vision, and how can we differentiate ourselves in the market? That is a question of strategy. How can we distinguish or differentiate ourselves from a market that is already saturated by a lot of people? We must think, because however we decide to do that will be critical to the survival or success of our companies. 2, what are the key opportunities and threats in our industry? So whether you are in fashion or you are in construction like Engineer Umar, one of the things you must ask yourself to help guide your decision-making prowess is, what are the opportunities here and what are the threats in the industry? And how can we align our resources to capitalize on these things? Again, business is about decision making. When you get into management, you discover that management is, let's say, 90% decision making and problem solving. So we must begin to think strategic decision questions. What is our vision long term? This business I want to do, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this something I want to do for the next 20 years and then pivot to something else? Is this going to be my retirement plan? Is this going to be something that I'm just doing to make money? Sometimes there are businesses people start just to make money. There is no future in those businesses. Some product-based businesses just import something and sell them just to make a few bucks. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to think, you have to ask yourself, what is the plan? Because when you realize what you are doing, it helps you to make the right decision that suits yourself and your business. Number 3, how should we position ourselves against competitors? There is no business without competitors. But how can we position ourselves against competitors? And what strategic alliances or partnerships will help us to achieve our goals? You see, when you think like this, you begin to do business differently. You begin to run your units differently. What alliances do we need? What partnerships do we need? What can we do to position ourselves to be ahead of our competitors? And how can we achieve these things, realistically speaking? Those are the issues we're talking about. So all of these things are called they all fall under strategic decision making. Number 2, every business, yours included, must make financial decisions. Before we talk about financial decisions, let me know those who are following. Okay, good number of us are here and we are following. That's wonderful. I can see engineer taking notes. So financial decision, every business must make financial decision. All right, let me get to the screen, for instance, and show you something. This dollar sign is very important, because ultimately every business must make a financial decision. There must be decisions that boil down on money, capital, loan, debt. What are we going to use? So let me give you an instance. When people are starting their businesses, one of the questions they usually saddle themselves with is, should we borrow to start a business or not? Should we borrow money or should we not borrow money? That is a very critical question, because sometimes when you finish borrowing money, you realize that the money you have borrowed is one of the reasons why the business cannot even grow. Because sometimes debt can be a terrible thing. And then sometimes avoiding debt is also a very bad decision, because there are times that you should be using debt to grow your business. In fact, there are times that even though your business is generating revenue, it still makes sense for you to get external debt in order to fast track the success of your business. But the question then is, so how do I know when it is okay to borrow money and when it's okay not to borrow money? How do I know when it is better to give out shares or to give out equity, or is it better to get debt as in loan? Or is it better to do other forms of fundraising? Which one is even better? Well, I can't sit here and tell you what is better. But the best I can do is to help you to understand that these are decision-making processes that will determine the fate of your company. And one of the best things you can do for yourself is to think of these things as critical decisions and to follow this class to understand how some of these decisions are being made by some of the leaders, best leaders in business sphere. Once you understand how they make their decision, you can copy the same model to help you make decisions in your own business so that you can have better outcomes. So when we talk about financial decision, we're talking about what are our short-term and long-term financial goals. How are we going to allocate resources to achieve our goals? Should we invest money into building our own property, or should we rent? Should we invest a lot of money into having a sophisticated, fancy office, or should we have something just decent? None of these things is bad. One may be bad for you and good for me. One may be good for me and bad for you. It depends on how we arrive at those decisions. Number two, what is our current cash flow situation? Are we generating revenue? How much? What is this? What is the profit margin that is coming in? Or are we looking to break even maybe 2 years or 3 years after? What are the financial risks that we need to take in order to ensure liquidity and stability? Sometimes businesses would have to take financial risks, but these risks have to be calculated. They have to be thought about. They are not things you just wake up, roll your sleeves, come to work and start making them. You need to think. And once you master thinking about business like this, you improve your chances of success in business generally. The third decision that every business must make is marketing decision. There is no business that can exist without marketing. It may not be the traditional type of marketing. Companies like Tesla, for instance, barely do advertising, like TV advertising or influencer marketing or something like that. But they have other ways that they create buzz around their business, which is also considered as marketing. So basically, every business, every entrepreneur, every manager must think and make critical decisions around their marketing efforts. These are some of the questions we're going to be asking ourselves in marketing decision. Who is our target audience? And how do we effectively segment, target, and position our product or services? Let me give you a practical example. Should we serve the masses or serve exclusive people, the elite? Whether you choose to serve the masses or you choose to serve the elite, I don't think any one of them is wrong. But what I believe is that the individual needs to understand what they want out of life and use that to guide them as they make decisions. You have to understand that if you are serving the masses, maybe you have so much crowd. Maybe you have so much people coming into your program. But again, you have to deal with a lot of things that you may not like. And then if you are dealing with the elites, maybe the number will not be so big or whatever, but there are other benefits of dealing with them. Whichever one you choose to do, how you will market to these two different market segments are different. How you market to the elite and how you market to the masses, they are two different marketing approach. And you have to think about them. Who do I want and why do I want them? One of the decisions I made when we brought Fodax to Abuja was that we don't want to cater to students. When we are doing training, especially public speaking training, people will say, oh, do it for students, do it for people, make it cheaper, make it affordable, something like 10K or 20K. My problem with targeting students is that most of these people are not yet working. So how exactly are they going to get the money to pay you for your services? So for me, I felt like this is not the right market for me. If I'm going to be spending my whole month coaching someone, I want to make sure I'm coaching someone who has the capacity to pay me. However, there are other people that target, students, and they're doing great. Whichever one, you have to ask yourself, what is the decision-making process? What am I trying to get out of this? And I'm going to share how to make decision, towards the end of this program. Another marketing question is, what is the best pricing strategy to maximize revenue while remaining competitive in the markets? Now, why this is important is because pricing is everything in business. If you get your pricing wrong, you will definitely be out of business. I can assure you that. So you must think critically about your pricing. And the next one is, how do we measure the effectiveness of our marketing campaigns? There are businesses, even some of us that are listening to me here, that their marketing campaign, there is no tracking, there is no record. They are doing it as the Spirit of God leads them. So sometimes they do this, sometimes they do that, sometimes they post here, sometimes they post there. There is no measuring, there is no concreteness, there is no, you can't point out how last month is different from this month and exactly how much we need for next month. This might sound okay if you are still building, but you can't build a sustainable business that way. You have to learn to measure your marketing efforts and know where most of your customers are coming from, and then recapitalize, then put more capital in the places that are giving you the best results. And even ask yourself, why is it that this other one is not bringing results? There must be something that is missing, because knowing what is missing can also help you to either introduce new products or at least understand your product or your customers or your targets better. So we must begin to ask these critical questions. Number 4 critical question critical decision every business must make is operations decision making. Here, we're going to be asking the question, what are the key processes that drive our business? And how can we optimize them for efficiency and cost effectiveness? Key processes that drive our business. Using engineer again, because he's into construction. Construction is not something they just hire you today and you start tomorrow. There might be, some legal consultation. Make sure you have this and you have that approval and this approval. There might be some kind of investigation or monitoring of the soil to understand what can be built or what is allowed to be built in so and so place. There might be need to do proper drawing, drawing the building, mapping out everything before the engineers will be sent or whoever will be sent to start the actual work. All of these processes these are decisions. Who is going to do this and why? You go to some businesses, before you can get your inquiries to be attended to, it's like a military zone. You will talk to somebody that will talk to somebody that will talk to somebody before they will address you. That means there is something wrong with their operational process. So once you review your operations, then you will be in a better place to make better decisions. Number 2, how can we manage supply chain risks, and ensure that we have the right inventory levels and resources at the right time? These are critical questions. Number 3, what metrics will we use to monitor operations performance? How are we going to monitor performance to say this team, they are doing well, this department, they are performing well or they are not performing well? How do we monitor these things so that we can give accounts, or so that when we call you to the office, we'll be able to give you proper feedback on where you need to improve on regarding your own department? The next decision that every business makes is human resources decision. And some of the questions in that regard include, what is our talent strategy to attract, retain, and develop the right people for our business? Does your business have a talent strategy that helps you to attract the right people into your business, that helps you to develop your own people? But here is where it's even more interesting, that helps you to retain them. Because lots of businesses, they attract, they develop, but they don't retain. My business faced the same problem some years back. You attract, you train, they leave, right? So you must ask yourself, how can I retain them? Because you cannot keep on wasting resources and recycling your processes with different people coming in every new month or every new year. How do we build a strong company culture that aligns with our values and drives employee engagement? These are some of the questions we're going to ask, because company culture is critical to your organization. But how can we build it? We may not necessarily copy what other people are doing. So how can we build our own? How can we build something that aligns with our values, aligns with our overall objectives and goals? And number 3, what are the compensation benefits and training structures that will motivate and retain our workforce? compensation benefits, training structure. These two things usually help to retain employees. Employees will stay if they feel like there's a future for them in your organization. People don't stay where there is no future. Most people, at least, don't stay where there is no future. But people can stay where they feel like there is some kind of progression. They feel like there's something coming up, there's something I'm working towards. That's why people stay in government works, because of retirement and the benefits, even though it's nothing to write home about. But at that time, people thought it was the biggest thing after cashew nuts. So they were working hard to get to this level, and then to get to the next level, and then to get to the next level, and all the benefit that comes from it. But all these things are decisions that has to be made. And if you are not making those decisions, you are leaving your business for chance. Number 6, businesses must make technology decisions. This includes, how can we leverage technology to drive innovation, improve efficiency, and gain a competitive advantage? How can we take advantage of technology? It is not about castigating them or hating them, or saying this one is bad or that one is terrible. You must think, how can we take advantage of what technology has to offer us as a business? Number 2, what is the return on investment on investing in new technologies or upgrading the ones that we have? And how big is the ROI? If the ROI is very tiny compared to what we are expecting, then it makes no sense for us to even invest in it. But if there is a huge ROI, then it makes sense for us to do something about it. I don't know if you are following. The next one, how do we manage cybersecurity and data privacy risks? The business should start asking, how do we manage these risks? What if we get attacked? What if there is a breach of data, of customers' data or staff data? What are we going to do about it? How do we ensure that these things are protected? How do we ensure compliance with standards or industry standards and regulations? Even in Nigeria, currently, there is a data privacy regulation, and they are talking to businesses to make sure that they align with them to protect consumer data. So these are part of technology. Now, if your business is not asking these questions, let me give you one question your business should be asking. What are the technology that will be relevant in my business in the coming years? This is one of the questions you should be asking. What technology will be relevant to my business in the coming years? And how can we leverage on that? How can we build around that? Because you don't want to be a latecomer. You don't want to get there when every other person have already explored the possibilities and the potentials. You want to play the game, you need to know the technologies that are there. The next one, the next critical decision is legal and compliance decision making. Legal and compliance decision making. Your business must begin to ask, what are the regulatory requirements in our industry, and how can we ensure full compliance? You don't want to start. There was a business, a friend of mine, one of my developers, told me it was a very great business. It could have made us a lot of money. But when I looked into it, I said, we're going to have legal issues around this business. This is not a business. Because any business you build and government will be coming after you every week, for me, is not a business. They're going to crush you. You know, it's only a matter of time. There is no future here. So it is one of those things, if you want to start them and then maybe get some money, run into problems, and then leave it, take the money and do other things, if you want to follow that path. But telling me you want to build this as a business with a future, there is no future unless the law changes. And sometimes we individuals, we don't have so much control over our legal system. So you must think of compliance. Legal compliance is very important. And how should we structure contracts, agreements, and partnership to minimize legal risk? If you are a business person, by now, you should have known the common problems that usually come up when you have contracts. You should have your contracts updated and improved on to protect your business against different things. Part of what people started including in their contracts post-COVID is something called, I think it's called force majeure. If you know what it is, you can type it for us. It's like where you indemnify yourself against things that you don't have control over, things like earthquake, war, pandemic, which can potentially affect your customers. You say, listen, in the case of this, you won't hold me responsible because there's nothing I could have done. Pre-COVID, many people in Nigeria were not including that because we don't have earthquake, we don't have any reason, we don't have so much that you would say is there was no war since 1960 or so. So, but now we have started including them because we have started learning that, listen, these things nobody really knows, anything can happen. So you must begin to improve on your contracts and your documents. What steps should we take to manage potential litigation and dispute? How do we handle disputes? How do we handle legal cases? Remember, you are a business, you're not a politician, so you cannot be telling everybody go to court, go to court. You are a business person. Legal cases will not just distract you, they will waste your time, they will spoil your name, and sometimes they will waste a lot of money. So it's better to find other ways to resolve issues without having so many legal problems. These are decisions we must make ahead of time. Number 8 decision, and I think that's the last decision, is innovation decision making. We must ask ourselves, what are the emerging trends and technologies that could disrupt our industry? Example of such technology is AI. And AI now is penetrating almost every market. There's AI that literally does your drawing, that does your designs, that does your graphics, that does your audio, that does note-taking, that does almost everything. So you must ask yourself, how is AI going to affect my industry? How is it going to affect me? And you have to be realistic in your estimation. You have to probably look at what other people are saying and pay attention. It's not enough to say, no, it will not affect me, it will not affect me. No, you must think. You must think and make critical decisions around that. Second one, how do we foster a culture of innovation and creativity? Basically, how can we encourage our people to be innovative? How can we encourage our people, our team, without shouting, without people would just wake up and think critically on how to move the organization forward? And finally, what is our strategy for developing new products or services? Do we even have a strategy on ground for developing new products or services? Critical questions. So what I'm saying in essence is that all businesses, every business, it doesn't matter what you are into. And if you think your business, none of these things concerns you, you can let me know. Let me see those who are here. If you think all these things I'm talking about does not affect your business, let me know which one you think does not affect your business, because this cuts across all businesses. Every business must make a strategic decision, a financial decision, a marketing decision, an operations decision, human resources decisions, legal decisions, technology decisions, and also innovation decision. If you do not make innovation decision, other smaller companies or businesses will win. If you make innovation decisions, even if you are starting small, chances are that you will likely beat even the bigger organizations in the nearest future. That being said, I want to also state that an important part of decision making is to predict both long-term and short-term outcomes. So let me show you something. This is what I'm talking about. Decision making must attempt, because an attempt is not a perfect prediction, must attempt to predict what we call outcomes. Must attempt to predict outcomes. And in those outcomes, we have two, all right? So we have the long term, and then we have the short term. So we must look at whatever decision we make now, how does it affect us long term, and how does it affect us short term? So you may find that while an alternative seems most desirable at the present, it may pose problems or complications over a longer time period. For instance, businesses that start off trying to look like they are very successful, like they are very rich. So they rent apartments or they rent offices in expensive neighborhoods. The CEO drives very luxurious cars. They live big life. They spend money, especially when they get funds from investors. They spend all those money trying to look like, we are doing something great here. Short term. Short term, you look like a great guy. You look like, oh, you're doing well, right? But the problem is that you are shooting off your expenses, right? You are blowing off your money. You're spending so much that even when your profit finally comes in comparison to your expenses, your profit is very, very minimal. So long term, you are going to suffer for those decisions. Although short term, you are happy. Short term, you are excited. Short term, your friends are telling you are the biggest thing in town. They are all hyping you. But long term, you have a problem. Again, businesses that are built on deceit and lies and falsehood. Short term, you're going to make a lot of sales. You're going to get a lot of customers because people are gullible. So once you tell them something, oh, let's go. But then after 3 months or 6 months or 2 years, people begin to see through the bullshit. And they're like, no, this is not true. This is a lie. And then what happens long term? Long term, there is no more business for you to run. So in decision making, we must think of these things, the short term versus the long term. Whatever decision we are making, we must not just be blinded by the short term sweetness, by the short term outcome. We must also think of the long term impacts. Also, there are decisions we make that short term they will suffer us. They will not look good. You might not look so impressive. You might not really be happy. Everywhere might look a little bit dull or boring. But long term, you are happier. Part of those decisions is that sometimes when businesses have not discovered exactly what to do with money, it doesn't make sense to be borrowing money because you haven't even figured out whether there is a market yet. So what are you borrowing money for? So short term, you are struggling. You are doing what we call bootstrapping. You are bootstrapping. You're trying to know if I should do this or do that, if I should go here or go there. You don't even know what you're doing. You're basically like trying to know what to do. So short term, you look confused, you look tired, you look frustrated, you don't look flashy, you look unemployed. But long term, you begin to figure out, oh, this is what I need, this is where it works, this is what I need to do. And then you start improving. And chances are that long term, you have better success. So that's pretty much how decision making works. Now, that being said, let's continue. Let me give you an instance. Your company is deciding whether to launch a new product quickly to capitalize on a current market trend or invest more time in refining products for long-term sustainability. Now, they have short-term. In short term, launching quickly could boost immediate sales and market share by riding on trend. But long term, rushing the product could lead to quality issues, customer dissatisfaction, and high return rates, damaging the brand reputation. Overall of what I'm saying is what I've already stated here on the screen. Let me show you, right? Whatever it is, think of the outcome. Think of the long term and think of the short-term outcomes. If there are things that you can bear, then fine. But if there are things that you cannot bear, and if there are things that you don't want, then it's better to maintain critical decisions that propel you towards your own destiny. So I want to ask you a question, and let me see if I can get a response this time. Do you have a decision-making process? And how do you arrive at that decision-making process? So let me start with, who should I ask? Let me ask Queen. Queen, do you have a way of making your decision?
Okay, yes. So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so normally before I make a decision, I'll maybe do my research on the pros and the cons of that decision. And I see
Okay.
that if the pros outweigh the cons, then that means it's a fairly good decision to make. But if I see that the cons are way bigger than the pros, then I think I will need to change that decision. So yeah, that's what I do.
That's interesting. So Queen is using a framework called the pros and cons framework, whereby she looks at the benefits versus the disadvantages of that decision, right? So if she wants to launch a product or a business, she asks herself, what is the benefit of launching this product versus the disadvantage of launching this product? And then she does a sort of comparative analysis, and then she makes up her mind on what to do. That's really impressive. Yes. So let me get to, I don't know who this is, but the name here is Fellow Jitster. Who could that be? Okay, let me get to Israel then. If I don't know who Fellow Jitster is, Israel, do you have a way of making decisions?
Uh, some decisions I make, I weigh each decision against each other. Which one feels more important to go through with than the other, depending on time, depending on necessity, and depending on how things may turn out in the future.
Okay. There's something Israel mentioned I would like to bring to our attention. He mentioned time and necessity. Time and necessity. That's really powerful. That's really powerful. You agree with me that time makes a difference in everything. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because take for instance, when you graduated from school, that time you were like a fresh graduate. There are jobs you could have done. There are opportunities you are open for. There's a kind of money you can also accept as a staff, right? But 4 years later or 8 years later, after you've invested in yourself, you may not be able to accept such salaries anymore. Not because you are pompous, but because of the time, right? You are no longer in the phase where you could have done maybe internship for 6 months. Now maybe you have family to cater for. You have a life ahead of you, and you can no longer settle for something like that. So time is also a very critical factor in decision making. When are we looking at, and how exactly do you intend for us to go about this? That is timing. And then necessity also, how important is this stuff that we're even looking at? Do I really need it, or is it something I can do without, right? So that's time and necessity. So I think there are three frameworks we've learned from Queen. We learned pros and cons. From Israel, we learned time and necessity. These things are, I believe, they are really, anybody can use this to also make their decision. Let's give an instance before I talk to other people. Let's talk about decision on who to marry, for instance. Decision of on who to marry. Let me go with Queen. So Queen says, this girl, let's assume Queen is a man. This girl I want to marry, if I marry her, what are the benefits of marrying her versus the disadvantages of not marrying her or even marrying her? And then she weighs the options. Okay, if I marry her, she's very, very helpful. She's supportive. She's caring. She's whatever, whatever, whatever. She's like, okay. Versus the other disadvantages. Well, disadvantages, your costs are going to go up high because now you have a partner, so you'll be spending more. Different other things that they will consider. Now we come to Israel's philosophy of thought. Israel's philosophy of thought says, where are you now? What period are you now? If you are in a phase in your life, using Israel's philosophy, for instance, if you're in a phase in your life where you are making, say, less than 200,000 a month, right? There's a kind of woman, practically speaking, you can marry. There's a kind of woman you're supposed to be dating and marrying. You don't want to go to someone whose weekly expenses is running into hundreds of thousands, because you will not be able to maintain that, right? So that is because of where you are. And then necessity. Do you really have to marry, or can you leave this thing to the next 6 months or next 3 years? So we can see that these things play out even in relationship as much as they play out in business. So let me talk to Mr. Pascal. Mr. Pascal, are you there? Pascal, are you there? Pascal, can you talk back to
Can,
me?
yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you a specific question. I know you are a developer. So, how do you make decisions when you are facing a bug or when you are facing a serious programming challenge? I don't know how to put it in context, but think of something bad is happening and it needs to be fixed. How do you and your team think about that or go about that?
The first thing we actually do is that we first of all, come up with a kind of a theory in, like, first of all we look at the problem itself, that the bug itself, that you know um that the system through, and then we first of all try to understand what the message of the bug itself is all about. And then we go about try to because the system itself is built, that you build, it's large, so in order to figure out exactly where it's coming from, you need to first of all come up with an idea where it's located. And then we go ahead and if it's something we can resolve immediately, we just immediately go ahead to look at where the thing is coming from and resolve it. If we can't resolve it immediately, we engage into research. Then when we research and possible solutions on how we can be able to resolve it, and then we go ahead and experiment it and see if whatever we find out there is actually going to work. So if it works immediately, we iterate and then we redeploy and then get the results and see if everything is working fine. And then that's when we finalize and arrive at that final product.
Okay, Mr. Pascal, you actually went deeper than I was expecting. But oh, to be clear, my board, is it flipped? Are you able to read what I'm writing?
Yeah. So
Yes.
personally, I mean, the way you asked the question, you were more specific in my career. But the way I normally make my decision normally is I first of all start with ideation. So I'll have my team, and then we come up with possible ideas regarding whatever exactly we want to solve or whatever we want to build. And then we embark on like a 1 week research and analysis. We gather as much data as we need. Now, with this data that we have, we start experimenting with those data. We start experimenting. After we experiment with those data, we evaluate the experiment we have with those data at each stage. We experiment, we evaluate that. At each stage we experiment, we evaluate that. So the result of that is what now we now pass it to the next stage where we start prioritizing. Okay, fine. Since we now know that this one works, okay, let's arrange it in a kind of a serial order, in order of priority, and then we start picking the one that actually really matters. For in this case, let's say we are building a product for users, a particular category of user or market segment. We start prioritizing the people we can actually meet, very that are very close to what we are actually doing, that we can actually get actual results immediately. So that's kind of how me I run my decision making with my team.
Okay, very good. Programming is pretty much like engineering, so it always follows a strict set of rules. But just for those who are listening, let me bring out some of the things you did talk about. You talked about putting it in theory. I think that's more like an attempt to understand what the problem really is, and formulating some concept. This is what we think is a problem. This is what we think is happening. And then you also mentioned something about research, which is that probably you are trying to find other solutions or how other people have solved the same problem if they have. And then I think I heard you mention something about experimenting. Probably that's like implementing the theory of solution and with hope that it's going to solve the problem, but then watching to see if it actually solved the problem. So that being said, the reason I asked this question is for you to know that there must be a formula. It cannot be, it must not be one formula all the time, but there has to be some kind of formula or framework for decision making. So what I do in my office is every time my staff does something, I always ask them, how did you arrive at this conclusion? And what I realized was that for majority of them, they don't really, there's no process to arriving at a decision. They just make up their mind. They just say, oh, let's do it like this. I say, why? So there was no reason. You just made up your mind to do it like this. What I was trying to teach them is that decisions should not just be made. You don't just say, let's do this like this without having a reason, without having thought through it, without having a thought process that helps you to arrive at that decision. I don't even mind if a staff does opposite of what I asked them to do, which at some point my executive assistant did something similar to that. But I was not angry, and I took it. Why? Because his decision-making process, the process through which he arrived at the decision he finally made, it made sense to me that he should have made that decision, even though the decision was contrary to my instruction. I don't know if you are following. So if I come in, for instance, and say, nobody should leave this office. Let's say I come in and I say, nobody should leave this office. That's my instruction. But then somebody, one of the staff, started having asthmatic attack. It makes sense to take the staff to the hospital, which is against my instruction, right? But the idea is we're all staff, right? We're not slaves. That is one. Two, this person is having asthmatic attack. If we don't attend to it, the person could die. Maybe the reason you asked us to not leave the office is because you were angry that we are not productive and you wanted us to be productive. But that does not mean you want us to die. So if somebody is going to die, it makes sense for us to save the life of the person, because this is human life we're talking about. That for me is decision making. There has to be a process. And what determines how I perceive the quality of your decisions or choices is actually the quality of your thought process. You know, what are the factors you consider? Because those factors speaks a lot about your value system. They reveal so much about what you value, and you know, some other considerations that are very, very critical to how you arrived at whatever you decided to do. So that being said, I want to review some of the decision-making models that a lot of leaders around the world have used successfully. And I want you to take note of these models and try them in your everyday decision-making process. Everyday decision-making process. The more you do them, the more you learn, all right? What are decision-making models? These are frameworks that help people or teams to make decisions by breaking down the process into manageable steps so that there won't be second guessing. There has to be a process that helps us to make decisions. Now, at the end of this lecture, we are going to give you an assignment. That assignment will involve you making a lot of decisions. Please choose one of the models, or even in the assignment, they will specify the model that you should use. Make sure that you understand the model very well and use the model specifically to solve that problem. There is a reason why the assignment is asking you to use a specific model to solve a particular decision-making myth or dilemma. So here is the first model I want to talk about. It's called rational decision-making model. Rational decision-making model involves identifying the problem. I think that's what Pascal also hinted on. It's really, really close to what Pascal hinted on. Identifying the problem, gathering information, generating alternatives, choosing the best action, implementing the decision, and evaluating the outcome. So let's look at the decision on somebody wants to start a business and she has only 2 million naira, right? Somebody wants to start a business, she has only 2 million naira. Now she's wondering if she should spend 1.2 million to get a shop in Gwarimpa, or if she should go to Kubwa where she can get the same shop at 400,000, thereby having 1.6 million extra, as opposed to Gwarimpa where she will pay 1.2 million, thereby having 800,000 extra. How can she make that decision? Using the rational decision model, she will first of all have to identify the problem. So please help me. What do you think is the problem here? What do you think is the problem here? Hello?
Can you come with the question again?
Okay,
Yes.
let me Let me repeat the question on screen. Let me see if that helps. I said somebody wants to set up a business. A lady wants to set up a business in Abuja. She has only 2 million naira. She has only 2 million naira. That's 2M. Let me see if my screen can come a little bit closer. Okay. Yeah. So she has only 2 million naira, which we can see here. But she has two locations where the business can exist. One is in Guarimpa. I don't know if it's Guarimpa I said before. One is in Guarimpa, but rent there is 1.2 million annually, meaning she's going to have 800K left at the end of the day for the actual business, because this is just for rent. The other one is in Kubwa. Rent in Kubwa is I think I say 400K. So she's going to have 1.6 million left. I now said, using the rational decision-making framework, which we can see on the screen, it starts with identifying the problem before gathering information, before generating alternatives. And I said, what do you think is the problem here? What do you think is the problem?
Dr. Mike,
Yes, sir.
first of all, you need to identify the type of business you're going into. After identifying the type of business, then who are your target?
Yes, sir. So what I'm saying is, what can we say is the problem? We want to identify the problem now. What can we say is the problem?
Yo, can you hear me? Hello.
Mind you, there's no straightforward answer to this, because everybody depends on how you are looking at it. So it's not like a primary school question that it must be this or that. There is no straight answer. But considering that this lady has 2 million and she has two choices, one place is 1.2 million, one place is 400,000. What could be the problem? Israel, you can speak, yes.
Oh, can you hear me? Am I audible? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
I think I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so for me, what I think is it's a problem of making it's a location decision. She wants to make a location decision. So what she should do is first look into the kind of business she wants to do. So is at her customer base in Guarimpa or in the other place you mentioned, because that would, and so if you're starting a business and you have to rent a shop of 1.2, will 800 be enough to buy your goods? You have to process all this, put that into consideration also. And then so it's a question of customer segmentation.
Please, Mr. Israel, please, can you wait? Can you wait? I want us to take this thing one step at a time for a reason. Can we focus on the problem here? What is the problem? That is the question now.
You're not buying any set up the office and all of that. So it's
Sir?
just a lot of
Okay, if you can hear me, what we are looking for now is the problem. We don't want to analyze the whole situation. What is the problem here? It's a very simple problem that we can see here.
So it's a location problem.
There's a location problem. It's a very simple problem. You don't always have to overthink a conversation like this. There's a location problem here. That's number one, right? What other problem can we see here?
I would have said money problem, but I
Money
don't want to
problem.
say that.
Yeah, there's also a money problem. That's correct. There's also a money problem. In fact, all this whole thing is just two problems here: location and money. Because if she had 8 million, she wouldn't be in this problem. She's in this problem because she had less money. She had 2 million. That's a problem. And two, location, because whatever location, that's what Israel was also trying to say. Whatever location she chooses can affect her business. So what kind of business is she going into, so that we will know what location we would advise? But you know, we're using a hypothetical situation here, so it's not like it's a real life thing. So we're going to go with maybe fashion business. I know that fashion business can work in Kubwa, and fashion business can work in Gwarimpa. But looking at a specific problem here, we have location problem and money problem. Having identified these two, there might be more if you look at it too. So I'm just saying these are the ones we can quickly identify. Looking at this, we now move into gathering information. So it is at the stage of gathering information, we can now start asking her, what kind of business do you want to do? Who are your target customers? What kind of profit margin are you looking for? That's where we are gathering information. We might even call our friends in Kubwa and say, tell me about fashion business in Kubwa. We call our friends or relatives in Gwarimpa and say, tell me about fashion business in Gwarimpa. We're gathering information. You know, you are even asking the entrepreneur, what do you really want to achieve? What do you want to do? All of those questions that Israel is pointing out will work in the next phase, which is gathering information. Now, after we have gathered information, we start generating alternatives. In